privilege to welcome you here to the European launch of Agile Portfolio. I say European launch because Barbara Roberts has just come back from Australia a week ago, where she launched Agile Portfolio in Australia, which means I'm one of the few cricket fans in the country able to talk about a massive success on an Australian tour. We have a panel here of people who are not just kind of authors or academics, but these are people who have lived portfolios, projects, programs, Agile and otherwise, for many, many years, and together have literally written the book on Agile Portfolio. And I know they've written the book because there it is. Working from the far ends, Peter Coesmans is based in the Netherlands and has a reputation for getting projects that can't be done and doing them. And something of a reputation, I think, also for pointing to organisations and making sure that the talent that is in those organisations is actually being used. So people over process and all that kind of stuff. Peter, like the other people on the panel, is at home with complex, messy, big projects, in particular in engineering. Alex Clark describes himself as a pragmatic Agile evangelist. And you'll get the kind of sense of who these people are as we go along. These are not people who are kind of homing in on one particular method of Agile, or even Agile at all costs. Pragmatism and agnosticism is part of the mantra of what we do at the Agile Business Consortium. Alex has most recently been doing very, very large-scale projects in financial services, but before that has worked in the private sector across a range of different sectors and in government, and joins us with that kind of that history of working on those £50 million plus kind of projects. Pete Measey is a man who's hard to miss or avoid. Pete, as the founder of RadTac, I think is one of the people who has done the most in this country to really grab the commercial possibilities of Agile and make them work, and has taken that beyond these shores. Pete has been involved in the management and organisation of projects for people like British Telecom, British Airways, Rolls-Royce, Nokia, and in his spare time he still manages to train people. And again, back to the agnostic part of things, yes, Pete is a DSDM, Agile PM trainer, coach, but he's also well embedded into Scrum, does a lot of work in other frameworks. Last but by no means at all least, because it's a panel of experts, but you know, sometimes you have to pick one person out. Barbara Roberts has been around in Agile and what was DSDM, the Agile Business Consortium, right from the start. And when I say from the start, I mean going back to 1994 when DSDM was first launched. Barbara is one of the people who went out and delivered the initial projects to kind of test the groundwork. Barbara was there right at the start of Agile PM, the course that we successfully launched with APMG and now has become the world's leading Agile project management framework and certification. And Barbara has been the person that has led Agile Portfolio to fruition. So I'm very, very proud to ask Barbara to come and talk to you about Agile Portfolio and what it's all about. Yeah.
So I can't actually pretend I'm a teenager then. I'm the one that doesn't do serious, so...
And I was supposed to put that slide up.
Okay, do you want to do that now then?
These are the people over here, and these are all the other people who contributed.
Right, so 15 minutes then, which is great. So this is about the framework for business agility and positioning where portfolio sits within that. So when I went out to Australia last year and I was talking Agile Programme, I got my ear battered the whole time about programme great, fantastic, what about portfolio? And because there was such a drive from them, when I came back we moved it to the top of our strategy, and it's been a very busy 9 months or so, and I promised that I'd take it back to the Australians, so apologies UK, the Aussies got it first. But I've tried this presentation out. This is a compressed version. They seem to love it, so hopefully nobody's going to throw anything at me. So we've got the stuff that most people are familiar with, the Agile projects, the Agile programs. Strategy and portfolio, in our overarching strategy for business agility, we're moving up into portfolio management. So we touch on strategy, but we're not going into detail about how to do strategy. We're just talking about strategy as it affects portfolio. So what we started with is, what's the expectation for a portfolio, traditional portfolios? And it's something that's carefully handcrafted. People often spend a lot of time creating it, and sort of similar to laminating it, what they produce is something rather like this, which is very nice, but the reality is probably slightly different, because over time stuff changes. Things that seemed a really good idea sort of go sour. Hands up, who's seen portfolios delivering something similar? Excellent. I like you all already. So what we tried to do is say, right, how do we bring the portfolio alive? How can we describe what an Agile portfolio looks like, how it should fit? And what we're trying to do is take the portfolio from an elegant still life picture to a dynamic interactive experience, because my favourite technical term, stuff happens. All the time, stuff happens, and if we don't react to stuff happening, you deliver the wrong thing at the wrong time to the wrong people. It might be beautifully crafted, but it's still the wrong answer. So what we looked at with Agile Portfolio is this concept of event-driven. Everything that happens in a portfolio is driven by events that are affecting the portfolio. They could be events internal to the portfolio. So if portfolios are about delivering change, about delivering the strategy, every time you complete an initiative, the world has changed. So within your portfolio, every time an initiative within your portfolio does something, events have changed, you need to look again at what you're doing. You've also got events external to your portfolio. That might be that there's another portfolio and they're in trouble, potentially, and you need to maybe back off on what you're doing and deliver or help them deliver something of theirs. And then also we've got events that are external to the organisation. So these would be regulatory, competitive threats, strategic opportunities. And what we're trying to do is make sure that the portfolio is reacting to stuff that's going on around it, rather than looking back at this beautiful still life picture. Because the world is just not like that anymore. It's changed. We've identified that at the heart of everything, it all comes down to change. Whether it's a BAU tweak, a project, a programme, a portfolio. Everything is about delivering change, making change happen so that the world today is different to what it was yesterday. So we started with a definition of what a simple change process looks like, and then we refined it to say, well, what does that mean for portfolio? So for portfolio, we start with confirming the drivers. So that is, first of all, making sure that we either have or understand or have got an up-to-date strategy, because that's what's driving the portfolio. A portfolio is simply there to get the strategy live, to deliver the strategy. It doesn't do stuff itself, it just gets everybody else to do stuff. So I liken a portfolio a bit like to being an air traffic controller, that you're setting stuff off, you're backing other things off, you're dealing with emergencies that you didn't see coming. But it's all about bringing things into land that actually deliver the strategy for the organisation. Once we understand the drivers, then we need to confirm the foundations. And what we're trying to do here is make sure that when we're looking at ideas, when we're evaluating initiatives, whether they be ones that we expected or ones that have come in from left field, they're all evaluated in a plain, clearly stated, objective way. So it's not about paying somebody to be a very senior sponsor to get your initiative through. It's about judging everything on the same criteria. So the foundations is about deciding what are the criteria for influencing, for blending, for balancing, for setting initiatives off. Deliver the change, so that's where we say, right, initiative B, off you go. And that could be a programme, it could be a project, it could be a BAU change. And every time we deliver some change, that in itself is an event. So apart from the ones coming outside the portfolio, deliver change goes to the next step, which is we need to keep it current. So whenever we have an event of any sort, we've got three choices. We either go back and deliver some more change, or if it's a bigger change, if there's been more impact, we might need to go back and reconfirm our foundations, Well, the reality is maybe we need to go back and look at our strategy. Again, there's a perception that strategy is something you do once a year. And for a number of organisations, I know they laminate it, hang it from the ceiling, and everybody admires it for a year, and then you do something else. This is about making the strategy and the portfolio live, living. So the events reflect that the world is changing, which drive further prioritisation, blending and balancing to make sure we're always aligned to the current position, depending on what's just changed, and that will lead to refinement of our plans. So again, plans are living things, as in all things agile. We started by trying to work out how do you describe an agile portfolio. We had great fun with this. I'm sure you'll enjoy this. We started out with the concept that with a portfolio, everything is about making the strategy real. So what we should be focusing on is delivery of value. It's not about cost, it's not about benefits, it's about value. Where's the value? When I coach people, I know Rena will know, I make them a nightmare to manage because they sit there going, where's the value? But that's what we should always be asking, where's the value? So the portfolio is about delivering the strategy by delivering value to the organisation. And then we looked at the other end. For those Star Wars fans, I couldn't get the moving one. We talked about the fact that in portfolio there is a load of stuff out there. Far too much to manage, far too much to focus on. You know, it's like a galaxy of information, and if you try to get all of that into focus, you'll probably get a migraine, or at least a serious headache. You just can't deal with that. But some of it will come into the portfolio, some of it will disappear, some of it will come at you like a comet very fast, and you need to deal with it sooner. And then we had the concept of the portfolio is sort of like an egg timer. So basically we've got stuff in the portfolio, we're feeding it through, and we're dripping through value. But we realised there was a missing piece. And I would like to thank Peter Coesmans for this brilliant idea. He said, what you need is a sort of a vortex. So I went on to images on Google, and it came up with that. So that's what we came up with. So there you are, that's an Agile portfolio. We then spoke to our graphic designers, and we said, right, so what we've got is we've got a galaxy, we've got Hoover, we've got an egg timer, and we've got some sand. And he went, what? So I said, no, really, this is what we want. So he said, okay, I've got it. Went away, came back with a very blocky, square, left to right thing. And we basically said, that's horrible, that looks like Prince. Sorry, but it did. It was sort of very logical and sensible. What we want is a galaxy, a Hoover, an egg timer, and some sand. So he had another go, and it wasn't much better. And we said, right, let's back to basics. We want that. So I give you the Agile portfolio. The Australian guys have already asked me to change this because apparently we need to take the black line off the top. And they're right, because it suggests that everything that's in there stays in there. We want more chaos, so it will change. This is version 1. 1.1 will be so much better. So what we have at the top is we've got stuff swirling around. At the centre we've got the innovation hub, the thing that is actually making change happen, and dripping through we have value. So I think, you know, third time round, and you're allowed 3 goes in DSDM, you always have been, it actually works really well, and it's probably one of the really, really strong concepts. So what we recognise is at the top of the portfolio, out in the galaxy, we've got these unformed nebulous ideas. Don't stress about them too much. If you're going to have to deal with them, trust me, they will come in your line of sight like a comet. A lot of them will disappear, so don't try and focus on all of them. Don't try to plan for all of them. It's a waste of time and effort. It's just being aware, like an air traffic controller, there's a lot of stuff out there. Most of it probably won't affect you at the moment. We then identify that as you come further towards making change happen, we've got initiatives that are we class as future. And we've categorised future in 2 ways. We've said you've got future immature ideas, so they've come in from the galaxy, they're still not fully formed, but we're already starting to bring them into our line of sight. We've also got future-ready initiatives, and these are initiatives that we're going to kick off, but not just yet. So it might be you've got a regulatory change, you know you've got to do it in 6 months, it's future-ready, you know what it is, but we'll just leave it in the future horizon. And then we have current, and these are initiatives that are either up and running now or are already scheduled to start imminently. So these are the ones that we have the very close focus on. And we have completed initiatives, and these are initiatives that have already finished, but we're still tracking the value, hopefully, the return on investment. But ultimately, reality is delivery of value. And we need to get much smarter with portfolios about thinking more about value and perhaps less about cost. We should also be thinking about the likelihood of success rather than just the cost. So it's value and likelihood of success. Am I saying it right, Parag? You're checking as we go. So we also looked at how do we schedule what we're going to do. And we recognise that prioritisation, much as we love Moscow, it isn't enough. It's not just about what must I do first, what should I do next, what could I do later. It's a lot more subtle than that. So we identified that we also need to look at blending and balancing. So it's recognising that sometimes it makes sense to do initiatives together as one initiative rather than two separate ones. Sometimes we also need to balance how much change we're throwing at a particular area of the business. So in terms of prioritisation, blending and balancing, if we're looking at the unformed and the immature, we just prioritise that, we balance that very, very roughly. It's our best guess at the moment, but it's not accurate. There's a lot of volatility in there. As you come down to the ready, we're balancing that more accurately because it's coming close to our line of sight, coming close to our kicking off. And when we've got stuff that's current, basically what we're doing there is we're fine-tuning that based on events happening inside or outside the portfolio. And what we then did, just to make life even more interesting, is we took the egg timer, Hoover, sand, and turned it on its side, because with Agile we're always looking at horizons. And we identify at portfolio level there's three horizons. There's the longer term view, and that is rough ideas of what may be coming in, what the sequence might be very roughly, but we're not trying to pin it down. We've got the near-term view. That is much more accurate because it's either in flight or about to start in the very short term. And we've got the picture of today. And we should be able to get a portfolio snapshot of today as easily as we can get a snapshot of an Agile project or an Agile program. So ideally, that's where we're looking for the transparency, where the information can just be pulled from that level rather than pushed from below. Because when you're pulling information up, it's more accurate. Occasionally, progress reports have been known to lie. If you're actually looking in, you see the truth. It is true. They do. One thing I learnt last year was the concept of watermelon projects, which I thought was really good. Green on the outside, red on the inside. Okay, that's my 15 minutes.
Thank you so much, Barbara. Hopefully you'll have the same reaction to that egg timer, that hourglass that I had when I first saw it, which was just an enormous kind of ping moment of kind of understanding and clarity. So what we're going to do now is have a few questions. I'm going to start people off just to warm the panel up. And then what I want you to be doing is just reflecting on what you've just seen, and just see what you can come up with that will get their grey matter working a little bit, because they've been sitting quietly, three of them, not doing very much. So if we can just start off by asking each of you, if you have to pick one thing that you would kind of take away from the work that you've done, that you would go into your next engagement with at a portfolio level, what would it be? What's the big message? What's the thing that can create some of that value that Barbara's just been talking about? And maybe we start at the end, Peter, if you'd like to.
Good one. For me, it's the value thing. So really focus on value. Yeah, thank you. Really focus on value and make sure that you don't carve it in stone, and after a year find out that you've done nothing and do the same thing again.
So. Thank you. Alex?
So I think practically every organisation I've worked with or in has had an annual budget for change. The finance department always likes to have a nice big number that they can say, yes, that's what we're going to be doing during the year. And the corollary of that is that quite often you get into the fun and games, which in some organisations starts in August, in other slightly less disciplined organisations starts in December and possibly January, where they figure out what they're going to do with that money. And they either do the bottom up, where you come up with a list of projects that amounts to about 3 times what your budget is going to be, or you do it top down, which is better insofar as you get the senior stakeholders to say what it is that they want to do, but then you've got to bring them back to reality as to what you can actually do. So it's always very frustrating from a portfolio perspective, trying to answer what I think is an idiotic question, which is what projects are we going to do next year? I think the key thing, and it's articulated very well in the portfolio model, is that you only have certainty for what you can see in front of you. You will know what are the key things that you have to do. There will be large-scale projects that you know are going to persist during the year, but deal with what you can actually manage, which is what you've got in front of you and the stuff that's going to come beyond that.
For me, it's Agile Business Consortium. So thinking about value. So, you know, we've sort of been talking in the last 15 minutes about the importance of delivering value. If you consider that to be a business, what many organisations do is the way they deliver in the business is horizontally. So they'll think, okay, we'll transform the way HR works, we'll transform the way IT works, we'll transform the way sales works. So they're thinking horizontally in departments, and therefore they raise departmental budgets. Yeah. The other way to think about that is value, so vertically across the business. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at this element of value that's going to give value to our personas out there, you know, the value propositions that the market's actually interested in, and then we'll deliver it across the business. Then we'll deliver the next bit across the business. Then we'll deliver the next bit across the business. That has huge implications on running the business and also making sure that that which you deliver gains credence in the market and is actually used by people. So for me, it's the Agile business framework. There's lots of other scaling frameworks out there, you know, all of which are good frameworks, SAFe, DAD, Nexus, LESS, so you've heard of all of these, but they're largely focused on IT. They're not talking about Agile business, and for me, that's where the real power comes from.
For me, the interesting thing is that this describes a simple portfolio. A colleague of mine does 27 layers of portfolio, but that would have been a bigger book. That's chapter 2. But talking to people over the last few weeks, what's interesting is talking to organisations that are either Agile mature or Agile immature. If you're Agile mature, this is seen as the next step up from project, from programme to portfolio. Talking to the Agile immature organisations, we identified that this is a good starting point. If you put this very, very light framework in place, and it is light, and it's Agile agnostic, underneath that you can have Agile projects, non-Agile projects, but it gives you the control to make sure that you're focusing on delivery of the strategy and keeping it current. And because it's written in a way that's simple to understand, it's the sort of thing that anybody can look at and say, we can do this. There's stuff that we can start on. It's not complicated. It's not full of jargon. It is just common sense, because that's what ABC's always done.
Thank you, Barbara. Before I open it up to the floor, just kind of pick up one thing that you just said, Barbara, and just open this out to everybody. For an organisation, one portfolio, lots of portfolios, what are the pros and cons?
Well, if you're an organisation that has 27 layers of portfolio, I wouldn't want to make it one portfolio. But the risk is, if you have lots of portfolios, if you're not careful, you have a portfolio per budget area. So you have a portfolio for marketing, and you have a portfolio for HR, and you have a portfolio for IT. So I think going back to Pete's comment, if you've got an Agile business, yes, you can have layered portfolios, but they should always be not siloed portfolios. They should be business delivery areas. So I think it depends on the organisation. Somebody said you should always have one, but I think, you know, the ones that have multiple complex portfolios would say, well, that won't work for us. So like everything else, it depends. Yeah, I'm a consultant, you know, it depends, but it really does.
I think it depends a lot. No, so,
well, you're
no, that's absolutely right. No, I totally agree with all of that. So yeah, it's about, you know, what are the personas? Who in the market? It doesn't really matter what you as a business think your services and products are. Who cares? What it matters is what the market thinks your services and products are. So, you know, what are the value propositions? What do people actually want to buy from you? So that's about thinking exactly as Barbara was saying, is rather than thinking about how we run our business, how do we set up the business to actually deliver that which the market wants? So again, it's those vertical slices to actually make sure that you get the value out there. Now, how many portfolios would you have? Depends what the market wants. You know, depends how big your organisation is, depends what different products you produce, what different services you produce. So it could be anywhere from 1 to 500, you know, depending on the size of the business and what you're trying to do. Keep it simple as possible, obviously, but always make sure it's focused on what the market wants, what the value propositions are.
I don't think we've thrown in pragmatic yet, so let's chuck that in.
Yes.
Bonus point.
Ding, ding, ding.
So if your organisation has got one budget and one group of fungible resources, then you should have one portfolio. If you've got multiple variations of those, then as appropriate, you should have portfolio management to match that. Match with the organisation rather than trying to impose something different upon it.
I've come across organizations that have said, well, our portfolio shouldn't be bigger than 30, 40 initiatives, otherwise we can't manage or we can't see it. Or we're not able to balance it because we don't have the overview, we cannot look at all the information. Again here, from a value proposition and from a value chain, you can have many more. It's not a problem because you don't have to constantly focus on everything that might be on the portfolio. As we explained with the Vortex, is you only look at those that are really almost ready and that are currently running. And the other ones, you can just keep out of the line of sight for a while or start developing them so that by the time you should be worrying about them, then you also know what you're worrying about.
Thank you. Right, I'm sure that people have got their brains whirring now. So what kind of questions do we have out there in the audience to tax these people? One at the back there. I think there's a floating microphone or two.
Hi, many of the IT leaders I talk to are familiar with the Agile program management and the principles, the first principle being aligned to strategy. If I had a question and it was how do the principles link to the Agile portfolio framework, what would your reply? Would your reply be it's the same as the core behaviours?
That's a difficult one to answer.
Everyone look that way.
Because we thought about this as a discrete thing, the way we see it working is that underneath that you may have Agile Programme, which is delivering benefit. You may have Agile projects, which are delivering stuff. You may have projects that are part of Agile programs. You may have traditional. So we haven't tried to bring it all together. Because of the way we've described this, it is a very light, sensible framework that says, here's what you're trying to do, this is how you can define the boundaries of what you're thinking about, and this is some guidance to do it. So we've defined some core behaviours in there, and we've worked out what you need to do to follow the core behaviours, but we haven't tried to map it back to the principles because they'll still work at the programme and the project level. So I think we haven't done that.
Perhaps to quote a good friend of mine, Michael Young, he's from Australia, and he's very much into portfolio management in general, and he's been writing also the ISO standards on that. And he says, well, portfolio management, even if you have linear projects, as I would rather call them than traditional, if you have linear projects, even then, your portfolio should always be agile. So this agile portfolio approach does, and in our mind, it does also work for completely non-agile projects and programs, which it should, because sometimes it's just very stupid to only do agile, but the portfolio will work.
Thank you. Okay, got a question down at the front.
You said prioritization, balancing and blending. What sort of parameters are you using? I'll tell you where I asked the question to give you the context. I'm just struggling with an organisation trying to decide how much an Agile program is going to cost them.
Okay, that's probably a slightly different question. In terms of prioritising, blending and balancing, we don't tell you in the book what the parameters are because they be driven by the organisation. So you're thinking about how much change can we cope with Again, we talk about the fact that the appetite to commit to change is far greater than the capacity to deliver it. It depends what else is going on in the organisation. So if there's already a lot of volatility in an organisation, you might back off on throwing more change at them from internal initiatives. So what we say is that this would be down to the organisation to decide what is the appropriate way to blend and balance. You know, where is it a good idea to bring two initiatives together and run them as one rather than two separate ones? But we try very hard not to tell people the rules, because the sad thing is they'll take those rules and then run with them without engaging brain, and it is so specific to each organisation. You know, if you're the stock exchange or an insurance company or a bank, or I was going to say a couple of guys selling CDs out of a garage, but they probably wouldn't be doing a portfolio. They're all so different. There's no way that we could say this is how to do it. We just say you would need to work out the best balance for your particular organisation, and it will be unique.
I think that's... Oh, sorry, after you.
We also did some writing on how to handle BAU, because sometimes business as usual is put outside of the portfolio, sometimes it's put in. And instead of giving rules and regulations, we said, well, these are the questions you should consider, and then decide whether or not you would put it outside the portfolio, or put it as a separate project or program in the portfolio, or a separate initiative, or have it run differently. So we just give some clues on what should you check, which questions should you ask yourself, so that then you can come up with a solution that will fit your organisation, your portfolio.
I think it also relates... I think it also relates to a reference that some of you are probably almost certainly aware of, Barry Boehm's kernel of uncertainty. The idea being, you know, in standard project management, program management, portfolio management, agile equivalents of, it's really all the same, and that is you've got the concept of baseline plans and commitment plans. So, you know, a baseline plan is anything after period X, possibly further out in a couple of weeks or a month or so. A commitment plan is anything on a very short time frame, and that's true in all frameworks. Yeah. So, you know, when we're thinking about an organisation that's saying, look, we want to have a good indication of how much this programme will cost and what times, yeah, you can say that, but it's only ever a baseline plan. You know, the thinking in the agile world is really, whatever you define, it's going to be wrong. It's a case of how much will it be wrong. It might be 0.5% wrong, it might be 90% wrong, but it's going to be wrong. So the idea that we've got here is, you know, you're only looking over a short period of time to align in sort of commitment area. And then further over time, excuse me, it becomes more nebulous. So we can still give an estimate for it, but that estimate would be a parameters, 3-point estimate. Yeah. So we can in Agile say, yes, we believe this program will take this long, this amount of money, or alternatively we can say we're going to deliver this, but we don't know what the time and money is going to be, or alternatively, so you know, it's about considering what do we want to fix and what are we actually going to vary, and then control that variance as you go forward.
You can tell you've scratched an itch when all four of us want to talk about it. I think the reason that we shied away from having things around specifics on categorisation, things like prioritisation, to pick up on Barbara's point, is it is so tied in with the culture of the organisation. I've worked for an organisation where the prioritisation approach was kept secret because they didn't want sponsors or project managers to game the system. I've worked for an organisation where the priority was done on the basis of who had the biggest budget. And I've also been involved in large and complicated models that try and get all the different variables associated with the portfolio and try and figure out, on the basis of that, which is the most important. And then have the CEO come along and say, well, you're done, it's that one. So I think it's got to be done within the context of the organisation you're working within. It's very much a cultural expression of that.
I'll just add a little bit on that as well. I don't know what everybody else in the room's experience is, but you know, looking at the gestation of agile approaches over the years, back in the day, some of the approaches were very, very detailed, very prescriptive, and the risk there is, you know, things like, well, I wouldn't call it RUP agile, but Rational Unified Process. There was so much in it, you had to understand it inside out, backwards and forwards to even get the faintest idea how to customise it to a real-world scenario. So we've specifically created this to be values and principles aligned. So it is very, very flexible. And I think what we've seen happen in the agile market over the last 20, 25 years is it's the frameworks which were really more at that values and that high level which have survived. You know, those are the ones which are still used very successfully today. So that's why we've gone down this route. Values and principles, and it's about the organisation thinking about how to actually apply it.
And I think also that there is a behaviour that we see with Agile is you see people that are supposedly Agile experts that will come into your organisation and tell you what to do and how to do it. And that's the wrong approach. You know, I will come and transform you is not the way forward. You work with somebody to help them transform. You know, I know we had this discussion at the manufacturing company, Alex, when somebody said to me, so what are you here for? What do you know about manufacturing? I said, well, nothing. I'm hoping you bring that because I'm bringing something else. And if you're working with an organisation, they bring their skills, they bring what the organisation is good at, and we help them adapt to a more agile world. But we never, ever go in and tell people what to do because that's false advice. And it puts us in a position of expertise in that we don't know your company as well as you do.
Great question, thank you.
Did that answer your question?
Thank you for the presentation. Very interesting. Where I sit, it looks like it provides a useful tool as you get a lot of sort of change-driven at a policy level in a government department. And my question to you is, how does this help you manage too much change? You know, do we end up giving the senior managers the feel they've now got a tool which allows them to drive a supertanker a bit like a speedboat?
Sorry.
I was going to say that there's a lovely quote somebody used at last year, I think the year before last conference, which was, danger may contain thinking. And there is always a risk that people will take it and try and, you know, say, well, it's going to tell me what to do. There has to be an education around this for senior management to understand that you can't keep changing everything all the time. If you don't ever create a status quo, if it's constantly in a state of flux, you just end up with chaos. So I think it is about saying to people there is only so much change that people can deal with, whether it's a government organisation or a corporate. The world is very volatile, but somehow we've got to try and make this manageable.
Yeah, again, definitely my experience. There is certainly a risk, you know, in organisations when they hear the word agile, it's, oh, we can do everything all at once and, you know, it'll all just magically be delivered in very short time frames, etc., etc. It's really about focusing on value, is what Agile's about. So, yes, having worked with a few government departments over the years at the sort of like the policy level, it makes a sea change to get the policy people much more working in this Agile portfolio way. So, you know, we've got a lot of churn going on, which we've got to sort of like that tornado, right? It then goes through an innovation hub. So we start to evolve more information on that which is coming down the line. Yeah? And it's only really when we say, okay, this is something that we need to get delivered to provide value to the market, then we'll focus on that and then keep going with that. So change, but not too much change. Too much change is only really definable by the organisation that's delivering that change.
I think running a portfolio is one of the most interesting jobs that you can have. It is all about, in my opinion, managing stakeholders because you have to be able to explain the art of the impossible. So there's always going to be part of your change budget that you've got to do on maintenance activities. If you're working in an area like financial services, then there's always a part that you've got to do on regulatory change. And then you've got this bit that's left that you can actually do change on. And you have to be able to explain to your stakeholders how big that bit is, and based on the priorities that they want to do, what they can deliver against. So I think it very much comes back to stakeholder management in the traditional sense.
For me, the key word is value. You will only deliver value if things you're changing actually improve the way things are being done. If there's too much change on in a certain part of the organization, the value will not be there. So if you focus on the value, you will be asking yourself the right questions in, can we do it there? And currently, I'm running a program for a large high-tech company, and actually this is one of the key things in which we are currently stepping up on some of the speed and taking down some other speed to make sure that we actually deliver there. We're delivering the highest value, but because of in that part of the company, everything's wrong, and everything needs to be changed, we'd say we're not going to deliver there first, we're going to deliver somewhere else first. So because there it will actually deliver more value, but not the highest value at a certain time. But everyone's focusing on that.
I think also with Agile, because we focus on incremental delivery of value, you sometimes end up with less change because you deliver something small that works. You don't necessarily deliver all the stuff that follows on that is less value. So you might actually be decreasing the amount of volatility by delivering little and often, and that de-risks it.
One of the things I'm using nowadays is everyone gets a new, I'm using an iPhone, everyone gets a new iOS every month or so. No one considers it a change because it's just a small thing. But so if you're not buying a new phone from a completely different brand, then it's not such a big change. So if you deliver it slice by slice in the salami technique, then probably you'll be able to absorb it because it doesn't feel like a change.
I absolutely agree. So for me, if you talk to business people, so I'm sure many of you are business people, if you talk to people who run businesses or have run businesses, they don't want big bang transformational change. It's far too high a risk. You know, if you're putting something in place every year or every 2 years, that is a huge risk to throw your whole organisation in the air and then hope it all comes back down again and still works. So very high risk thing to do. Also, typically what happens, which I'm sure you've all experienced as well, is that, you know, we're going to do a 2-year transformation programme. 6 months in, people start to get angry. 9 months in, people are getting to get really, really angry. A year and it gets cancelled. So you don't actually get any value at all. So splitting that down into small, valuable chunks, A, is a lot less risky for the business, and B, you're going to get value a lot faster, so they become self-financing.
I know I'm the moderator, but I'm just going to chip in here, because one of the things I think is so great about that hourglass model is the neck of the hourglass. I mean, those of you that are familiar with Kanban will know about limiting work in progress, and the idea that you limit work in progress to get the sweet spot that shortens your lead times, make sure that the stuff that's going through is going through at pace, but you're not trying to do too much at the same time. That hourglass, to me, gives you a portfolio level, the concept of limiting work in progress and getting that sweet spot. Right, what else have we got? Question over there at the end.
Hi, thank you very much for that. If a company fully implemented this portfolio approach, what kind of changes do you think it would have on its people within the organisation? You spoke about value, what about the values? So would there be a change on how the culture of an organisation felt or how it managed and developed its people?
If I give you a specific example, one of the things we talk about with the culture and leadership stuff is the idea that good ideas can come from anywhere. And we've got not a role, but a competency, which we talk about an idea generator. And so one of the things we're looking at is that if you're running a portfolio, you've got the stuff in the galaxy, but you've also got stuff coming in. Somebody might come up with a really bright idea. Good organisations, good agile organisations, people can come up with ideas and they get listened to. That's why people like Google and Spotify are so good. Older organisations, it's much harder. Sometimes they have a box on the wall, and it's usually full of please fix the coffee machine. But what we need is a way of bringing them into the portfolio. And what we looked at is that by defining the criteria that we assess ideas, they are assessed openly, transparently, and the idea generator will be part of that assessment. That brings them into seeing how their idea is taken forward or not, or why it's not taken forward. So what that's trying to do, as a very, very small thing, is open it up to, you know, this portfolio, anybody should be able to feed into it, not just your normal channels, because in my experience, there's huge amounts of value in organisations that we don't even realise we've got. And the more we can open up to those people and those ideas, that's free money. And that's something we should be developing.
Yeah, I totally agree. Individuals' interactions over processes until somebody has to say that. So you got the first value statements on the Agile Manifesto. So yeah, this is really, really important. Some of you, I'm sure, will have heard of Professor John Cotter, Leading Change, pretty landmark book as far as transformational change is concerned. Something I always say when talking to organisations and doing consulting, training courses, all that sort of thing. Agile is relatively easy, on purpose. Yeah, transformation isn't. Transformation is a very complex thing to do. The two words, agile, transformation. If you're talking about transformation, you're talking about changing the culture of the organisation. Now, the way Cotter sees this is you can't directly change the culture of an organisation. What you can do is change things in the organisation to then pull the culture change along. Now, you know, that aligns with my sort of experience. So yes, to answer your question directly, will Agile Portfolio Management directly change the culture? Hopefully yes, because if it doesn't, it hasn't worked. And, you know, one of the big beauties of the Agile Business Framework in toto is that it does have, as Barbara was saying, this area that's specifically focused on, you know, some of the people in the room there contributing, specifically focused on that as well. And if you don't have that element, in my experience, it won't work.
If you have a bunch of big beasts in a room who are responsible for delivering the business aspects of an organisation and you incentivise them based around specific goals in their areas, then you will get a certain set of behaviours. And they often won't be pleasant. I think the agile behaviours, as espoused by ABC, are a really valuable and indeed essential element to implementing any working agile framework, and particularly at the portfolio level. Given what you're trying to do, which is to subsume individuals into delivering the right result for the organisation, you need to have and you need to engender those collaborative behaviours that make that work. And that's hard.
One of the key values for me in Agile is making sure that decisions are actually made by those who know instead of those who have the power. And that's also very important in portfolio management. In many portfolio processes, I've seen those in power deciding for those that actually know and trying to think of the information that they actually gotten from them, but not really knowing. So I think that somewhere in the book it also says, get together the people that are actually influenced, get them together and do the decision together. Now, if you start doing that, that will give a lot of credibility to everyone. Instead of, as you just described, you put something in the machine, and all of a sudden an algorithm will tell you what the proper portfolio is for next year. People don't understand, and well, they're not allowed to understand. And this time, you're part of the decision making, so you will also accept the decisions that come out of it because you understand them, which makes it much easier, and which makes it so that will change culture. And as Barbara already explained, in Australia they see this as a first step towards agility, not the last step, but the first step, because.
I think the quote, and it was Peter's quote, was decide with initiatives, not about initiatives. And that in itself is quite a culture change. So if it's your idea or you're directly impacted by it, you should be part of the decision process. It shouldn't be decided by a group of people at, sort of in the clouds who don't actually get what this means.
It's interesting. I don't know about you folks, but so like relatively, it's relatively simple to see where the empowerment's at the wrong level in an organisation, because all the senior managers are really angry all the time. And the reason they're really angry all the time is that, their normal day is they turn up on Monday, they've now got 300 things in their inbox, 10 of which they might know the answer to, 290 of which they don't know the answer to, but they still have to make a decision on it. So they're extremely stressed all the time. So, that's a pretty good indication that empowerment and that decision-making needs to be pushed further down the organisation where the people are actually working who can actually really make those decisions. So yeah, that would be one example of a cultural change. Get the power at the right place. Power to the appropriate people. Yeah.
Okay, I think we've got time for about 2 more questions. So what have we got? We've got one down here.
How does value differ from the traditional business case approach when benefits against costs?
Sorry, can you just repeat that so we can pick it up?
Yeah, how does value differ, the focus on value differ from the traditional business case approach where you are looking at benefits against cost?
I think, in my experience, when business cases are done, I know when I used to be sort of like a project and program manager, it was really depends which stakeholders I'm talking to. So the first question I would ask myself is, who are these stakeholders, and how can I structure that business case to actually get through that stakeholder group, get through that steering group? And it depends who they are. It might just be that maybe my reputation is strong enough in that business, I can just say we need to do this, and that's what happens. Maybe, we need to be going down an incredibly complex route to define exactly what value is. Maybe it's cost-benefit analysis, all the classic stuff. So there's lots of different, there's lots of different ways to look at what value is. You might be looking at Kano analysis, yeah. You might be looking at what's the name of that guy who wrote my memory? The name of the guy who wrote the really complex approach, managing product flow, second generation lean. Thank you, Reinertsen. So you might be going down the route of Don Reinertsen. Very, very complex way of thinking about value is. So it depends how complex the organisation is. So yes, it could be cost benefits. It could just be relying on who the, what the product managers say. It could be going through a very detailed description of exactly what value means in our organisation. It could be doing Kano analysis. It could be doing what's the agile cost of delay. So there's all sorts of different ways of looking at this. It wouldn't just be cost-benefit analysis. Cost of delay, for example, is different to that.
I think the other issue with value is that sometimes it's difficult to actually physically quantify it. You know, sometimes it's not tangible. You know, so you can't always value your reputation as an organisation or value how well you treat your people, but there's still value in that. Cost benefit, it almost feels like a mathematical equation, and I don't think it's always that simple.
What I tend to see, despite the fact that everyone who's been writing about business cases said you shouldn't do it, is that the focus actually gets on cost, because those are the things you know up front. And you can say, okay, this is the amount of money we're going to spend. What you never know is what are you going to achieve, specifically not with value or with benefits that are non-tangible, but also with tangible ones. There is always a lot of assumptions in there. And everyone who's been writing business cases knows exactly where to hide them so that every business case is always positive. And so I don't believe in business cases anymore, because everyone's so focused then on trying to make this work, and is this going to deliver back within 1 year or a year and 3 months? Well, usually, no, it's not going to deliver back anything, because people are not interested anymore once the project or program is done. So it's never going to deliver back.
I was also taught originally that we should always do a business case for doing nothing. You know, what is the cost of doing nothing? And we don't do that. We're always trying to justify doing something. And it's personal, because it's our project or program and we want it to work. And sometimes, actually, we shouldn't.
It is interesting. I see a lot of benefits management, but I don't see much benefits realisation. So, you know, there's Barbara saying that the tracking of what benefits actually got implemented within the business. I'm just going to sort of cast something out there, so I really haven't got time to go through it. But I'll suggest have a look at something called Beyond Budgeting, which is all like talks about this sort of area, etc.
There is a place for having good, sensibly defined, appropriate business cases for projects. And it's better to have business cases in place than not have anything in place. But the gamut of things that you've got to have in a portfolio is going to include stuff that's not going to have a recognisable positive impact. So when you've got to do an Oracle upgrade because you want to stay within your risk appetite, when you want to do a regulatory change because it's something that's come down that you have to do to abide by to stay in business. You know, it's a cost that you've got to maintain as part of the change portfolio. It's got to be something that wipes its face against other stuff so that you prioritise it appropriately. It won't necessarily be susceptible to a business case view. And hence a more rounded view that incorporates elements of value, I think, is more helpful in doing that. I think one of the things that I learnt moderately late in life was when doing retrospectives, the most important part of the retrospective is to establish how happy the team that's working on the thing is, because happy people deliver more. And I'm ashamed to say it took me a while to realise that, but it's now what I always start off with in retrospectives.
Just following up from what Pete said about Beyond Budgeting, do have a look, it's brilliant stuff. There are going to be some very, very interesting discussions with finance. I've already made 2 of them very stressed before I left Australia. But actually, some of the concepts in there, if you don't take it to its extreme, it's the concept of, yes, all right, you might agree an annual budget, but then you draw down from it. The last thing you want to do is give your projects and your programs all their annual budget. Because once they hold it, you've lost control. The only way I ever controlled my children was to confiscate their pocket money. If I gave them their pocket money for a year on a Saturday, they'd be broke on Monday and they'd have a new iPad. That's what we do with projects and programs. And sometimes financial control. So the idea of you've got a budget and you draw down, and the budget follows the value, not the value follows the budget. But very, very interesting stuff. So it's Beyond Budgeting.
Yeah, well, definitely.
.org is.
I know. Sorry.
Go on.
I was just going to say, Reinertsen, who I mentioned a little while ago, Don Reinertsen, Managing Product Development Flow, Second Generation Lean. Good book to look at. Pretty complex, but good book to look at. One thing that always resonated with me that Reinertsen said was, you should look at all sorts of different parameters when you're looking at this sort of thing, but if you make it one thing, make it cost of delay. So weighted job first and all this sort of good stuff, which many agile teams do use. That's that sort of approach. Yeah.
There's a small book called the Little Book of Beyond Budgeting. It's a little blue book, well worth a read. Very, very interesting reading if you're into budgeting.
All right, so we're pretty much out of time. At the end of, if anyone listens to the podcast of In Our Time, there's always this bit at the end where they say, and here's a bit of extra time with Melvin and his guests. And they always ask, what was the thing we didn't get around to that you didn't get to talk to us about? So what was the thing that, looking back, you didn't manage to get into the book, just to finish us off?
I thought I just about squeezed everything in. But
Well, I think the question that I particularly wanted to ask Barbara was, does the vortex go the same way in Australia?
No. We did try to work out how to get animated graphics in a book, which would have made it a lot more interesting. Good one, Alex. Yeah. I can't think of anything. Originally, it was supposed to be a pocketbook and end up as a mini book. And the reality is we went straight for the mini book because we couldn't compress it anymore, but we didn't want to make it any bigger. So I think as simple guidance, I think we got everything else we wanted. When we get to writing book 2 with the 27 layers portfolio, I think I'll hand over to somebody else for that one.
Right, on that note, we shall let you go, get something to drink, get a little nibble. It just remains me to say thank you to our panellists, thank you to all of you for coming. If any of you want to get more involved in the work of the consortium, in particular in the work that we're doing around things like culture, leadership and strategy, then please talk to us because we're really, really keen to hear from you. But I just finish by saying thank you to Pete, to Alex, to Peter and to Barbara. Thanks very much.